Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Patariu for the Mitigating Unauthorized Web Scraping Alliance. We're here with Morgan Guesdon. He will be discussing his white paper today that talks about defining web scraping to improve its mitigation. Morgan, please introduce yourself.
First and foremost, thank you, David. Thank you, Musa, for the invitation. So I'm what we call a CTI analyst, cyber threat intelligence analyst in a company called Own Security based in Paris. So in the past, I was an analyst in the French army, and now I work for Own Security. We are a cyber threat intelligence company, and we have a few companies we help with, to protect their business from data breaches, intellectual property theft, and other vulnerabilities caused by unauthorized data extraction.
And so, Morgan, you put together this white paper to help your clients and I guess the larger cybersecurity community understand the issues around unauthorized web scraping. And of course, we've done a few webinars before with your team. And I want to know just why do you think this paper is important, and what prompted you to write this white paper?
So scraping is a problem for a lot of entities, and we realize that we're talking with the different parties is that what constitutes web scraping is not always clear. Some people will, and it's normal, they will think data extraction, scraping, maybe it's stealing, maybe it's like, it's hacking. It's not hacking. So the goal is to agree, all of us, on what constitutes web scraping.
And I think the beginning of your paper, if I might read some of your work here, takes the World Wide Web Consortium's definition of web scraping, which is an automated method used to extract large amounts of data from websites, whereby the data is extracted and saved to a local file in the computer or to a database table in a spreadsheet format. And so that's one definition. Can you tell me, or tell our audience how scraping and the goal of scraping is different than what's done for web search, where a company or an entity is trying to index? So what's the difference between, what a search crawler does versus somebody that's scraping, just so that people understand the difference between the two?
It's a very good question, actually. And usually, just so you know, when you have a website, you have something called human traffic and you have something called bot or automated traffic. So like you said, there is something normal, like indexing, that search engines will, what we call crawl, they will go all over your website. But the thing is, it's automated, but it's not on a big scale, You will have 1, 2, 3, a few robots, going slowly. Okay. The thing with scraping, it's automated and massive. So that's the definition. David, you gave last time a very good analogy. It's like you're at a wedding, fancy wedding. You just have one plate, per person that's present. But if you behave like you are at an all-you-can-eat buffet, you're gonna have a problem. So basically, scraping is taking a normal function. Okay, let's say go to website and check profile, but do it on a very big scale, and it may cause a lot of problems.
And so like when somebody's crawling or using a bot to index sites for search, that's kind of different because it helps people find things on the internet. Whereas scraping is purely somebody collecting information, a third party, and downloading it. And sometimes they're honor the website's terms of use or terms of service, and sometimes or often they don't. And that's why we talk about unauthorized scraping. So I guess another kind of thing to think about is when you're talking about web scraping and your clients, why is scraping a problem? Why are companies concerned about it? Why are people coming to Own to try to mitigate or reduce scraping or fight against it? What's the downside if you're getting scraped?
So usually there are like technical, there is a technical side and there is a legal side. So the technical side is, as I said, if like a third of the traffic on your website is from bots, it means that you're paying infrastructure, you're having people to fix it. It's gonna slow down the experience for others. But there are a lot of other depending on your business, a lot of other implications, because it means they don't respect the term of services. You have also, the problem is it depends on where you are based, but you have privacy violations. If you have a website that's a social network, they can pull off the pictures, personal data. And there's also copyright infringement. And there's a lot of legal implications, and as well as you said, ethical implications, because when the indexing happens, it's ethical because they do it slowly in a respectful way, and they do it in order to do something that's accepted, not to extract, which is sometimes like stealing the data.
Yeah, so that's right, Morgan. And I mean, just to kind of maybe add a little bit to what you said, somebody that's scraping third party you have no relationship with, you don't really know what they're going to be doing with that data they take down. So maybe user data, maybe data related to pricing or information about your company that these third party entities are taking and packaging and then doing something else with. So your representations to your end users saying, look, we honor access, correction, deletion. Well, if somebody just takes that data off your site and then does something else with it, you can't honor any of those requests anymore because with that data that's been packaged and sent elsewhere. And Morgan, you mentioned on our last call, just to recap in case people haven't had a chance to look at this, that there's a marketplace for scraped data. And if you could kind of just to frame this issue before we get into the white paper, what does that look like? Is it just a few bad actors, or are there people actually paying money for this stuff?
No, actually, it's a full-blown ecosystem of marketplaces. You have something, you have like what we call gray markets, because they're gonna sell the data and they're gonna pretend they don't know where it's coming from. So you can legally, they're like established companies, and it's a very gray area. They're going to say, oh, but it's public data. So if it's public, we can extract it and we can sell it, even if it's, copyrighted or there is personal data. And you have criminal, you have kind of underground markets, and, it's a full-blown market, and you can have anything you want. And you have personal data, you have people scrape product data, you have betting data. They will scrape to copy, scrape pictures, scrape videos, anything can be scraped. There is a market for anything.
And a market, you mean people are actually paying money for this. So somebody posts like, hey, I just scraped this website, pay me €100 and I'll send you the whole everything I scraped. Is that what we're talking about?
Exactly. And what's crazy is it's like everything. Like if the data is hard to get, or if it's massive, or if it's fresh, it can be very expensive. So something that can be sold for a lot of money usually is what's extracted for social media. It's something that's very popular and it commands a lot of money. Because unfortunately, it's very important, very powerful data that can be used for marketing or even for scamming. So it's a market and everything has a price. And depending on, on the demand, the price can be very, very high.
So what is just because now you piqued my interest in this, what are some of the highest prices you've seen for data?
So usually to be honest, what we saw usually is for social media and what we call full scrapes. So people will pretend to have visited every profile on a social media and they can sell it for maybe $100,000. You can see this kind of price for exclusivity, good quality. You can see $50,000, or for some of the high quality scrapes, you can see, $100,000.
Wow,
So anything is possible.
Yeah, $50,000 to $100,000 for high quality scrapes. And I mean, another question for you is for companies that are, kind of dealing with this or looking at it, how do they usually come to you? Do they say, oh no, we saw that somebody's trying to sell our data for $100,000, or is there a few different paths that clients come to own to try to figure out what's going on the scraping front?
So most of the time, what happens is they have complaints. They can get complaints from users or from regulators that tell to them, okay, what happened? Why is, why is part of your data online? So they have to solve the problem because it's bad for, legally it's bad, but even regarding the clients, because the clients are not happy, it's a big problem. Or because I always talk about social media, but if you have a business, we have another client, it's a business, and they realize that a competitor is scraping the prices like every day. So it's a big problem.
And so when you do find out that when a company does realize that this is an issue, and you kind of talk to them a little bit and help them understand about what's going on. What are some of the first things you talk to somebody who's like a CEO, or what are the first things you say to that person about, what you can do and how you mitigate?
So usually it's when you talk with the C-suits, you always have to talk about like responsibility, legal responsibility, and about cost. So usually we try to show them, okay, you are liable, maybe for a lawsuit coming from customers, or maybe coming from the clients. And also we try every time to show what is the damage that is done before anything, so that they understand what damage is being done to the business. And because sometimes if people are scraping a lot, it can slow down the system, so they can lose clients, they lose money. It's the customer service, the customer experience can be degraded. It can be a big problem. So when we come to see the CEOs, we always try to come with something concrete. It's what we saw. Here is what you risk in money. Here is what you're losing. We try to come with concrete facts.
And so when you talk about slowing down a site, so just to kind of recap that, so if a third or half of your traffic are bots or these automated programs that look like a user and are just grabbing data off your site to be used elsewhere, as I say, exfiltrating data to sell in these marketplaces or something else, that has an impact because it causes your pages to load more slowly. They cause what we call latency. I mean, is that the kind of things that, in other words, like the end user experience for the users that are not a bot becomes worse and your site is harder to use for them? Is that accurate?
Exactly. So it's also one of the ways they contact us, because they say, okay, we have, the servers, the IT always has to be scaled. And they know that they have a certain amount of clients, and they should have enough power, but they realize they don't have enough power, and people are complaining. They say, oh, like, I'm trying to buy something, I'm trying to see the pictures, and it's very slow, and why? And some people, they give up, and they lose clients, and it can be a problem. It is a problem, right?
It is a big problem. And now, has anything, kind of before we jump into the nuts and bolts of the white paper, has anything recently kind of increased the value of scrape data, or made it more, more companies want to scrape? Is there anything out there that has changed in the past year or so, to your knowledge, that is, or maybe in the past 2 or 3 years, that has made scrape data more valuable?
For some clients, we do like a market analysis. And what's interesting is the tendency of, we look like, how many services are, how many what we call scraping as a service, how many scraping data extraction services you have, and how many people are searching, how many people are looking, and we look even at how many tools are used, and the revenue of scraping companies. And it's been going up. It's been going up, not exponentially, of course, but it's going up. It's maybe 10%, 20% every year. The demand for scraping is increasing. You can see in the Google searches, but also in the revenue of big scraping companies. You can see all of them, the revenues are going up 10, 20% per year. So it's going up. It's not stopping.
And so I know myself, I think of scraping, and what a big demand for scrape data is training models for use with artificial intelligence, and specifically generative AI based systems. And I think that's probably something that's changed in the past 3 or 4 years, although for the public, it's just come on the market, but it's been out there for much longer than that. And I guess, have you seen, like myself, I've seen that, but in your practice, have you seen more scraping for people looking for conversational data sets, looking for image pairs, image text pairs, looking for textual data to train their models?
So it's very interesting. It's a very good question because, okay, so what everything that was about AI and data in the past, like before the boom of LLM and ChatGPT, everything was academic and was kind of free. But now it's very competitive, and with what we see, what I saw is big scraping companies. They have they sell data sets. So what is a data set? They're gonna sell text from a social network. They're gonna sell videos they took from a social network. They're gonna sell pictures, and it's a huge market. And I cannot to tell you we don't know the price yet because all of these are very big operations. Because people don't realize the size. If one picture is 1 mega, then usually they scrape maybe 100 million pictures. So it's not, some scraping operations are like small, big, huge, but everything that's for AI is huge. And we see the big companies, they have specific offerings and they stay. And the interesting thing is in their wording, they are very, very careful of what they say. They say, we only scrape public data, but they can scrape public, social networks, and the page is public, but privacy still exists, copyright still exists, so it's a big problem.
And just to be clear, that's an interesting point. People sometimes think scraping is only on publicly available data. But in your practice or does your group or your cybersecurity group, do you see people scraping behind a login wall or behind a paywall where somebody has, because everyone's like, well, why can't everyone just put logins on the pages and solve this scraping issue? But my understanding is that there's scraping that also goes on behind logins. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's true. And actually, what's interesting is most of companies will put the content behind the logging screen. So because this way they force people to enforce to respect the terms of our services. But what we see is for people who are scraping, for companies, it's not a problem. So scraping is like an ecosystem, it's not just scraping. So what they do basically is, okay, do you need an account? Then gonna try to find a way to create millions of accounts, and with each account, they're gonna scrape 100 pictures. And then, they're gonna do something, what we call rotation, something automated. So with what we call throwaway accounts. So let's say they want 1 million pictures, they're gonna create 10,000 accounts and use one account to scrape 1,000 pictures, then throw it away. So it helps to people accept the term of services, but technically it doesn't stop people.
So the terms of service,
people, but for advanced scrapers, it doesn't stop them.
So the terms of service doesn't stop them. It's just a document, right? It just says, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. What about, and something was interesting that you just mentioned is that it seems like scraping, it seems like it's happening all the time. And it's kind of different than a breach, whereas a breach is a punctuated, a threat actor has gotten into your system and they're there, but it's not like a threat actor every minute getting into your system. Or so, like, to your knowledge, and this is my thinking about it, scraping and what I've heard from clients and members of Musa and other things is that scraping is continuous. There's always people that look like end users that are trying to grab data off your site. And the challenge is distinguishing the scrapers from who are actual real users, distinguishing the bots from the actual people that are trying to use your site, purchase a service, find information. Is that your experience too?
Exactly. So it's a very good question because just like in the beginning, I said, what's important is to understand that, scraping is not hacking. It's somebody doing pretending to be a normal user on a very big scale to extract the data. the big problem is they try to act and they pretend they are normal users. So it's a big problem because if you want to enforce it, there are a lot of different protections. And security is always about balance. So
Yeah.
if it's like if you have a bouncer that stops everybody, then nobody is gonna come in and nobody is gonna buy drinks, nobody is gonna buy stuff, But voilà, you have to let people in, but not everybody. And the problem is where is the balance? It's a big problem.
Well, my clubbing days are long behind me, but I do remember that bouncers are, they can keep people out and stuff. And I guess that's a great point is that in other words, if you lock down your site so much that, you may defeat any scraping, you may also prevent any user from getting in and using the site. I mean, I guess that's the takeaway, right, Morgan?
Exactly. Like we've all been through this, CAPTCHAs. CAPTCHAs, it's, when you have to click on small pictures to prove that you are not a robot. And one is okay, but we've all been through this, and maybe sometimes you have one, then two, then three, and usually you give up because everybody has a limit, and that's the problem. So some of the systems, if you become too paranoid, you too much check, or it's like at the airport, of course you need airport security, but if every time it takes 6 hours to take the plane, maybe you're gonna take your car, it's kind of, it's a weird analogy, but always you have to think about balance.
No, I agree. I think a lot of people get that here in the US, we certainly do. We're like, well, if it takes me a 2 or 4 hour trip, well, I'm going to spend an hour at each end at the airport. I might as well drive and save some money. Yeah, people do that calculus. And it's the same thing with scraping in that analysis. If the website becomes too hard to use, I'll just go to somebody else. And that's unfortunate because, it prevents people from having good content and being able to see what they want to see and companies being able to provide information to end users. So now that we've kind of laid a lot of the foundation and so that our audience can understand what's scraping and that there's a whole ecosystem and an environment, it would probably be good to talk through this infographic that's been on the screen for the past 20 minutes. And I'm sure we've built lots of anticipation as to what it is. But Morgan, kind of walk us, and this is in your your white paper, Defining Web Scraping to Improve Its Mitigation. And so maybe we should kind of work through and just talk through this. And I think it's on page 2, the top of page 2 in your, it says Figure 1, schematic representation of scraping operation. And maybe we can talk through help the audience understand why this is important.
Yes, so it's important because we talk about scraping and it's the crux of the problem is data extraction. But scraping is an operation. You don't just come on a website and extract the data. Usually it's a big and complex operation. So we have to understand people who are scraping, how do they do this? So first thing first, it's 3 big steps: pre-scraping, active scraping, and post-scraping. So the pre-scraping is what happens before you extract the data. So let's pretend we are a company and we want to extract videos, from a social media website to train our AI. Okay, let's just pretend we do this. So the first thing we're gonna do is target selection. Okay, you identified the websites or the source to be scraped. So let's say, okay, I need a lot of videos, so I'm gonna take many social networks. Okay, so it's my list of source, my data source. And the next thing it's important is analysis and planning, because for each source, for each website, you have to determine what is the structure of the website, because it's you have to look where the video is and where you have to click. So it's gonna look at one video, download it, go next. Look at one video, go next. You're gonna look at maybe at the request. You're gonna look at how the data is available, and you're gonna look at the defenses because of course a lot of companies have protection systems. So you're gonna check, what is the logic behind the website, okay? And do you have some kind of moat to go over? I don't know if it's the right word in English. But if there is a
Mode is
mode,
accurate. Mode is right. Mode is in other words, a barrier or a way to prevent people from doing something. Barrier, mode, the same idea. Yeah.
and next comes tooling. What's very important, what we see in big operations is tooling, because okay, some people think, oh, I have some kind of scraping tool, but usually scraping tool, it's something that's gonna send, a request and then it's gonna download the data. So if you are on social network, you have a tool that's gonna connect, pretend to be a user, and then click next, download, pretend like send a command. So it's a complex thing to do automated actions, but pretend to be a human. So when you have, you have the target, you know where is the data, and you have the tool. It's what we call active scraping. It's when they're on your website and they're taking the data. So the first thing is access. Access, it means to bypass the protection. We'll talk about this later, but actually it's where most of what we call technical mitigation happens. Because, okay, it's where you get a CAPTCHA, for example, okay? Or one thing they do from technical mitigation is what we call rate limiting. Because when you are on a social, media, maybe you look at 20 pictures per minute. I mean, you don't look at 500 unless you drink a lot of coffee. But what they do is they limit how many actions you can do. So access, it means, okay, I bypass the security. And then you have the pure, what we call data extraction. So it's just they save, they record the data. And once they have this, it's not over. So what we saw in the big scraping operations, the problem sometimes, and also, especially when you have something like video or audio or pictures, it's data storage. Because you have to, and for AI, you have to store it, but you have to label it, you have to process it. So it depends on the data. But for pictures and videos, usually you have to put a label, like, is it a dog, is it a cat? There is, data is like, it's like something you have to process. It's like prime, I don't know who say this, but it's something you have to process. And the ending, sorry, go on if you have a question, David.
No, I mean that piece makes sense. So the active scraping and then the post scraping, they're trying to store it, process it, because it's not just they're not just giving end users or their customers a blob of data. They're
Exactly.
actually trying to do some pre-processing to say, okay, well, here's where the email address is, here's where the first name is, here's where the last name is, and make it more useful for their customers. Is
Yes.
is that pretty good? So in other words, when I say I did have 100,000 euros to spend on data, and I paid for a particular kind of data, maybe it's pricing data or competitive information, and so I downloaded that. It wouldn't just be a bunch of HTML pages; it would actually be structured and organized. Is that right?
Exactly. So what they sell is structured. And what's interesting is what we noticed is actually when they do it for one customer, they're gonna try to sell this data to another. So usually they're gonna cache the data, they're gonna keep it, and they're gonna try to sell to other users because they already did the job. So it's like a business, they want to extract as much money as they can from the data they have. So for some of them, they take the structured data and they offer it to other people because, of course, depending on the source, it can be interesting. So for AI, we see companies that say, "Oh, we scraped, 1 million pictures," and maybe they did it for one client, and all of a sudden they sell it to everybody. So that's why it's problematic because maybe they're going to do one operation, but then the data is going to be sold many times. So it's what we call data dissemination. It's the last step. So data dissemination can be, most of the time, it's sold. Okay, it's how it's sold. But sometimes it's used in marketing. Okay, in scamming, we see a lot of scams where they scrape, unfortunately, personal information. There's something I showed last time is unfortunately, senior citizens are a very good target for scams. So they will extract data from social networks and try to extract information from senior citizens. when we see, I want to add, okay, we see the whole process. That's why it's important, because if you are an entity, a company, there are a lot of things you can do. Usually you have technical mitigation and you have legal mitigation. So usually we do the technical, and David, you do the legal. We do the technical. But if you see the steps, there are a lot of steps where you can do things, where you can mitigate. For example, the tooling for some clients, we do legal and technical mitigation. So they're gonna receive some kind of cease and desist letter, and we're gonna analyze the tools, okay, and try to block them. So that's why it's important to have all the steps, because like every process, there are a lot of there are steps where everybody can do something. It's not only stop the active scraping. And same thing, data dissemination, it's where usually you can have legal mitigation, because you can sue them, or even technical. We're going to analyze the data to understand where it comes from.
Now you mentioned just in what you were saying in a few minutes ago, how you came, and in your paper you talk about this, and you say that in the own computer emergency response team that you were inspired by the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain developed in 2011. So can you talk about, now we understand the chain here, the ecosystem a little bit better, how the cyber kill chain and how that inspired you to put this on paper and into your white paper?
So I have a background in cybersecurity, and usually in cybersecurity, we use a lot of things that have been inspired, come from the military. So, Lockheed Martin, many years ago, they created something called the cyber kill chain. It's something similar. It's they describe a process, how a cyber attack, how intrusion happens. So you have how they use tools to enter, then break things, then steal. So it was inspiration because, of course, scraping is not intrusion, it's not hacking, but the higher view process is the same thing. Like scraping is a process, and I think it's very interesting we try to take this view of breaking things down in small parts to understand it better. And it works very well in cybersecurity. So because we've been using it, I mean, in the industry, it's been used for, I don't know, 15 years, and it's the golden standard. So why reinvent the wheel? Take something that's working and adapt it to the problem, to the threat at hand.
And so by breaking the scraping process into steps, as you have done here in this image, and then also if you've done in your white paper, this helps you as a cybersecurity professional, helps your clients understand the points within which you can apply mitigations. Is that accurate?
Yes, exactly. Because let's say you have a client, and usually you don't talk only to one person. Usually the companies have a cybersecurity team, okay? They have a legal team, they have a CEO, they have a CTO. So when you communicate with them, you have different interlocutors. And that's why it's not, oh, let's fight scraping. It's, we contact the legal team and we say, we found this tool, they're doing something abusive. And then we talk with the technical team. Okay, it's what we see. This tool is doing this pattern. Here is how you can detect it. And sometimes, so we give technical information, we give legal information, and even sometimes we have to report to the C-suits, and we have to take a higher view. And usually we speak with statistics and with numbers, but it's a threat, and you have a lot of different actors in companies. It's not just let's fight scraping. It's okay, legal, technical, cybersecurity team, and usually the leaders, because they invest money and they want, ROI is very important. They want to know, okay, I'm fighting this. Why? What are the results?
And so how do you measure results in fighting scraping and in using the methodology Owen has come up with? Is it a reduction in the bots? Is it improvement in the site? Is it less times that your company's data is posted on one of these data exchanges? what is the, or is it less complaints from users? Like, what are the, if you were trying to say, well, we've been successful or we've done a good job with this, what are some of the metrics or the indicators you look at to know that, hey, look, we're actually doing a good job here. We're actually helping our client.
So usually we're splitting what we call internal and external indicators. So you're going to have internal indicators is what the company sees from the inside. So we're going to track like, are the servers flooded? You know, how many bots, like what is the percentage of bots? Is the latency better? So how fast the service is answering, the number of complaints they get. There is a lot of, usually you measure technically what happens in the company. You measure what happens with the clients, and you do it as well externally. So if you fight, what's interesting is like in every fight. So usually if you start to fight, you can see the prices, you can see the price of the data is going up, you know, and then you can see a lot of tools that are trying to be created. And then it's a problem. So the price goes up, up, up. And sometimes it's so complicated that they stop scraping. So it's what we want. It takes some time. It takes some time to happen. But if you manage to, you know, to mitigate enough, you know, you can kind of kill, the goal is to kill the market, because you can see some of them, they stop scraping because they're like, it's like every business, when people scrape, they spend money. And if the money they have to spend, if it's too much, they're going to move, they're going to stop. So the goal is this. You look inside, so the indicators, and you look outside, like how is the market?
And so, you know, I mean, I guess, you know, sometimes cybersecurity professionals, what they're working on, when they're working on a breach, it's kind of in and out. And, you know, they kind of work on something and then they kind of implement some mitigations. But what you're describing to me, and maybe to help the audience understand this more, it seems like it's more continuous, more, in other words, you're going to keep applying mitigations and there's like a cat and mouse game. And so it's not just a one and done type of thing. It's something that you have to constantly monitor because people are scraping your site all the time. Is that accurate?
Yes, usually what we do is what we call threat intelligence. So if you have been in the intelligence community, if you've been in law enforcement, it's police work. You know, you have to you know, find the threat, okay, describe it, okay, and mitigate, implement changes, and, you know, see if it worked. And you have to be always on the lookout. So it's a circle that never ends. And of course, you have to have some goals. So you cannot I don't think you can mitigate 100%, but you can make maybe, you know, mitigate 95%. And that's why you have to track what you're doing. But that's why it's a continuous process. And for some clients, you know, we've been doing this for 2 years, and we've stopped a lot of things. So it's an ongoing process, but we have good results. But it's a continuous process because it's a cat and mouse game, and the scrapers are getting very good. They try to go around. So it's a cat and mouse game, but it makes a difference. That's why, but you have to track it. You have to have indicators and track them. But as you said, it's a circle. You have to keep on looking after them.
Yeah, to me, it seems like here in the United States, everyone is gearing up towards maintaining their lawn. And it's not something you can do. I mow my lawn once a year or I fertilize it once a year. It's like something you have to deal with every weekend. And you're weeding and you're mowing your lawn and you're kind of doing stuff. And it seems like scraping is a lot like that. And it's different than, say, if you have a big branch fall on your lawn or something and you deal with it once, that it's something that you have to kind of stay on top of if you want it to, you know, look
Exactly.
good or, you know, do what it's supposed to do, which is, you know, a place for your kids to run around on or something like that. And so scraping, to me, it seems like long term, it's something that you have to monitor on a regular basis based on the frequency of scraping, and that it looks like end users too. It's hard to detect. Is that would you use that same analogy in Europe, or is there a different one you use that's a little bit better?
No, it's good. No, it's exactly like this, because it's it's a constant problem. It's a constant problem. And what's very interesting, I could take an example, is Twitter. Okay, they changed a lot. In the past, it was very easy to scrape, and they had an API. Everything was very open, and now it's very hard to scrape, and they have an API. So it's one decision that was made. So it may be controversial, but it's interesting to see how companies do it. But yes, I remember they released some stats when it changed ownership, and it was very, very interesting to see the difference in behavior. But yeah, because it's something that never stops. It's something that never stops, and some sites, when you have 30%, 40% of your traffic that's bot, you have to fight it, every day.
That's right. So now it's kind of going a little deeper into your paper. There's a section that talks about using the framework to mitigate unauthorized scraping. And you kind of run through a few different things like identifying threat actors, assessing threat actor modus operandi, mitigating threat actor activities, and continuous monitoring adaptation. Can you talk a little bit about the identifying threat actors part a little bit more in the context of your paper?
So it's very interesting. As I said, it's intelligence of police work. Okay, let's say you have a website, and you know that 40% or a third of the traffic is coming from people scraping. So how do you identify them? So usually what we do is we do marketing. Okay, we search who is looking. We go on forums. Okay, we track websites. We track tools, and we see if it matches. Because usually most of this is public. So you have to identify them. You can identify by looking on forums, by looking at the companies, or even by just analyzing the data. Okay, if it's always the same IPs, IPs are owned by companies. So you can always use legal mitigation to identify, if you see an IP that's sending, 1 million requests per minute, it's not normal. So you can do something about it. So it's like intelligence. You have different sources, and you have to identify who is doing this. So technical, okay, you see an IP, you try to identify, because legally an IP has an owner, and in most of the countries you can sue, and the company has to explain, who is the owner and who is doing what. And on the other side, you have products. People are, they are scraping services, and same thing. You can analyze them and see what they're doing. So it's very important. It's very important. It's the first thing, like, who is harming you?
Mm-hmm. It sounds like basic cybersecurity, but in the scraping context to understand, or just kind of almost like what you do with any threat actor, or to try to understand any kind of an incident. I guess now, when you're thinking about understanding why the threat actors are doing, do you see variety? Do you see things beyond just monetization of scrape data, or trying to harvest a free resource and monetize it? Is there any other reasons that groups scrape data? I think in our webinar series, we talked about nation state actors scraping to understand troop movements. And to get intelligence on troop movements, because sometimes people will post, "Hey, we're moving to Japan," and if enough people do that, they may say, "Oh, maybe a country's moving a lot of troops or something to a different nation." So, what about what's your experience? Is it always just monetizing scraping data, or are there other reasons that these entities, these threat actors, do the scraping?
So yeah, usually that's why threat actors, so anybody that's a threat to you. Okay, most of the time we talk about monetization. People are gonna extract the data to sell it. But we see a lot of criminality depending on the data. But for social networks, we see a lot of criminals using the data. Recently, there has been a lot of people using AI to fake voice and call parents or call closed ones and pretend they need money, they have been kidnapped. And what they do is they scrape the videos from your social network, they extract the voice, and you can do this, on a big scale. And of course, what we saw, for example, what I saw a few months ago is a threat actor. So I don't know if it was a state, nation, but they wanted to scrape all of the social network because they wanted the list of all of the people. They wanted to know in which city they are based, what are their jobs.
Mhm.
So, and we've seen a few years ago there was a country that leaked. Was very interesting because we have to understand that a lot of people, what they do, okay, you have data, okay, but what they do is what we call pivot, or they cross the data. Let's say you have a social network, okay? Let's say, okay, you have the list of people, but what they do is they use this data with other data. So if they have the DMV data, they have your age. If they have the tax data, they know how much money you make. Then all of a sudden, you know what you have? You have a profile. You have a profile, and it's very interesting for state nation actors, for bad actors, because they know your worth, or they can pretend to be you. So what's very powerful and dangerous is because people see, oh, it's just this data. No, data, it's a possibility. And what the dangerous is enriching. When you enrich, so what we see is we see a market where people say, oh, okay, I have the DMV. Oh, okay, I have these people. And then if you cross everything together, what you have is extremely powerful. You have something where, you have everything about everybody.
Are people, this is a really interesting point, and maybe we haven't talked about this before, but on these data exchanges for scraped data, are threat actors entities selling these merged or enhanced data sets? Is it just I scraped and I have this data set, give me 100,000 euros? Or are they saying, look, I scraped here and I scraped this other entity's site, I merged them for you, that gets to the data dissemination or the processing of the data. And now I have an enhanced data set that's an aggregation of many different scrapes. Is that going on as well?
Yeah, so it's a very good question because it's something we see, but
Okay.
it's much more confidential because it takes a lot of money and manpower, and usually you don't see a lot of threat actors, and that's why I get very suspicious when people do this because it's not the common scammer that's gonna. Sorry for the simplification, but it's not the common criminal. Okay, somebody is buying phone numbers. Okay, they're scamming. It's like a common scam. But if somebody is trying to make a list, then you start to ask questions. Why does this person need all this information? And sometimes we see this enriched data, and it's usually sold not by criminals but by companies. So it's interesting. Is actually some companies pretend to be not criminals, but they buy data on these things, and so it's a legal gray area, but it commands a lot of money. So usually you don't see them, and when you see them, for me, it's always very suspicious, and it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money because it's intelligence work.
Mm-hmm. And just, before we close and maybe talk about some other exciting things happening in Europe, who are the victims here in the sense of sometimes it helps understand who the threat actors are, but at the beginning, it's like, well, who are the targets or who are the victims of scraping in all this? Is it more end users? Is it more the companies? Like or is it really is it nebulous and it's hard to really identify who's being harmed by unauthorized web scraping?
No, the thing is, it's everybody. So of course, it's like human perception. Your human perception usually is through a prism. So in the media, you're always gonna see, oh, there was a leak. Oh, this data with 500,000 people. But the reality, what we see with our clients is like the common man is a victim, but the companies, it's a huge problem. We have another client, as I said, which also there is another mitigation. It's funny. I mean, it's interesting. Okay, they are selling something. They have prices. So what they do is when they detect somebody scraping, they give fake prices. Okay, it's one of the things, kind of tricky thing you can do, but it's harming companies. It's harming companies because you invested money to create a product. And for example, if you are a booking website, as I always take the example because it's true, a booking website to book flights, you cannot put this between behind the login because you want everybody to search prices. But if people come and steal the prices, then what you did is worthless, and then it's a problem. And then same thing if you have pictures. So the problem is, it's like when it's about people, it's easy because it's the wow effect and they understand. But what they don't realize, it's a big problem because business is competition, business is investment. And why would you invest if everything gets stolen by your adversary? So it's like publicly, it's a problem. We always see about people, but it's a huge problem for businesses.
And how, like, if you were to give advice to some of these businesses that are victims here and are victims of scraping, and they suddenly realize that their data is on a exchange or something else, or their competitors have gotten their data, what advice would you give to them beyond just, hey, you gotta pay attention to this, or join Musa? What else would you tell them to do?
I tell, write to us. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
So as I said, the thing that works in cybersecurity, it's the intelligence cycle. Okay, something happened. You have to behave what we call like a detective. Okay, who is harming you? What are they doing? How are they doing this? There is no, because that's why we wrote this thing. Because there is no solution that fits everybody in 5 minutes. It's a complex process. So, stop what you're doing. Think, okay, who is harming us? How they are doing it? That's why. For me, it's start investigation. That's the advice I would give.
Now, Morgan, I would be remiss if in the last few minutes of this, we just had a probably monumental event in Europe, which was the passage of the EU AI Act, Artificial Intelligence Act, the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act, for people who are not familiar with all these acronyms. And so as a cybersecurity professional, what does that mean to you and your business, and how might it change it, or some thoughts? I know, probably a lot of people are still digesting what it means, but seeing as you're on the ground in Europe, what has the community in Europe been saying about this in your community, in your cybersecurity community?
So there is always a debate about protecting too much, and people are always comparing Europe and USA, saying that Europe is over legislating. Maybe we want to say this.
Over-regulating.
Sorry, over-regulating.
Yeah. Both legislating and regulating. Yeah, I've heard that.
So sorry, and
no, it could be, and sometimes people say that certain areas are under-regulated and that there's no legislation behind what needs to be done. So there's like the two sides of that coin. But
that's why. Sorry, Tom.
No, go ahead. But what do you think? Kind of impact on cybersecurity, and maybe what is OWN kind of trying to do to help their clients in understanding the cybersecurity obligations under the EU AI Act?
So for some clients, they have already implemented AI in their business, and they come to us for security, and they come first for security, like, okay, is the AI I'm using, is it safe? Does it answer to the different regulations? So I think what this European regulation is only, putting on paper something that's already existing. So it's only formalizing what's already existing, but we think it's important because it's taking a lot of place. I want to take one example. So there was a scandal in France 2 months ago because the people receiving welfare, okay, they realized that the government had an algorithm to check on people receiving welfare. And the algorithm was discriminating against single mothers, okay? And it was a huge scandal. And as you said, the law has something called the Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment. Basically, what it means that every AI has to respect what the European Union calls standards human rights. Okay, the right to dignity, the right to freedom, for equality, solidarity. So it's an example, and it was the government who made a mistake. So it was a huge scandal. So I think it's something that's needed.
So the fundamental rights impact assessment. So we have data privacy, DPIAs, data privacy impact assessment. We have privacy impact assessments. And now I think the EU Act introduced or maybe made clear that people need to perform these fundamental rights impact assessments depending on the type of AI system that they're deploying. And it seems like that incident in France where single mothers or mothers with children were being discriminated against for social benefits that are being provided by the government. And I guess discriminated against in that context usually means they're not getting them or they're getting less of a benefit. I mean, was that what was going on or?
No, it was basically what they do is they check like when in the US the IRS
IRS,
checks
yeah.
like did you fill your taxes well? So basically they were sending people and checking the bank account, checking everything, and it's harassment. It's the problem. And so somebody did like in the US you have freedom of information request. So they requested the algorithm. And they realized that the algorithm was discriminating against single mother and that they were being harassed. And the problem is that the social worker did not realize because the algorithm was just saying, okay, you have to check this person, check it many times. And so the social worker was just saying, I'm doing my job, the algorithm is telling me. So I think it's to prevent this kind of things that these fundamental rights standards, as they're trying to implement it.
And so you look at this and you say, what are some of the other kind of things that so concerns about fundamental rights are being upheld. And I think there's a lot of online resources to help people understand what those are in the context of the European Union. What about more maybe pedestrian things like just core ways people try to take advantage of a system or infiltrate a system like prompt injection attacks? Can you talk about that a little bit as it relates to AI and why people need to test and do testing of their models and examine to make sure that they're secure from that perspective?
Exactly. So it's a very good question because the main problem is what we call prompt injection. So what's prompt injection? It's something that's targeting chatbots or voice assistants, and it's somebody who manipulates the system's inputs to modify his behavior, and it can cause to reveal sensitive data or perform unwanted actions or bypass security. So basically, it's like if you're doing social engineering, talking to a robot, you're gonna use tricks to convince the AI, to do something it's not supposed to do. So, and we've already had, it's like hacking. It's a competition. A lot of people always try to break things. And as these systems are implemented in companies, in administration, in governments, it's very important that just like you do in cybersecurity with what we call pen testing, when you try to break the systems, it's important to have this kind of testing on a regular basis. And one of the things is prompt injection is one of the attacks, but you have a lot of different attacks. So a big problem is what they call data poisoning, okay? Mm-hmm. When you have data, when you train a model, okay, it's like when you're teaching something to a child. If you teach him, all the good stuff, he will be good. But if you start teaching him the bad stuff or wrong rules of grammar, he's not going to talk correctly. So something that happens is you can imagine you have a medical AI and you give them false reports. Then it's going to give you false advice, and you could have, unfortunately, terrible consequences. It's the kind of things you can see, or something that we see a lot is people trying to extract the data. So when you have a model, okay, when you have an AI, it's like a big robot. I'm trying to simplify things, and you feed him a lot of data, okay, and it keeps the data in the memory. And sometimes people try to trick them, say, oh, give me the list of names you have, give me this. And sometimes you can trick them into answering, and then it's giving personal information. So it's a privacy problem. And you have a lot of different ways people can trick. So it's important that you have some kind of framework, you have some kind of things you do to make sure the AI is tested and is as safe as possible.
It seems like people don't realize that what you're describing to me sounds like model scraping, where people are trying to extract information out of the model and attack it and reverse engineer it so that they can and then collect the responses to either train their own models or to see how the model would work. Because I guess everybody assumes that, okay, you're just training, but maybe you're testing another model and scraping the data using an automated, put in a prompt, see what it responds with, put in another prompt, see how it responds.
Exactly.
And just so maybe a model, Gen AI model scraping is another area that we would probably do a future, maybe you would do a future white paper on. That would be great for our audience, or just
Yeah,
have another talk about it.
we could do something about this, but yes, usually you have to think it's like a black box. So people will put something in the box and we'll see what comes out of the box.
That's right. And I guess privacy leaks are another concern, right? So sometimes you train a model and maybe personal information gets into it because a lot of these large data sets, they don't de-identify. I've heard some people say they're too big to de-identify, or that that's interesting. Interesting when people are training or honoring data subject rights. That's an interesting position. But how the privacy leaks, I guess, are most concerning because they're probably hard to test for. And how do you advise clients, or how do you work with clients to help them understand, look, if I come to you and say, I'm concerned there might be personal data in my model, I'm using a third-party off-the-shelf model, how would you help me determine or provide some confidence that we can watch out for that?
So there are two things. Well, if it's a third-party model, it means you didn't create it yourself. Because if you create it yourself, like the AI is just going to use the data you give to, you inject into. But if it's a third-party model, then usually we're going to try, there's a lot of ways, but just like we do with pen testing, okay, we're going to try to talk to the AI and have it, for example, they say, hey, do you know who wrote this article, or do you have a list of authors? Because most of the time, the data is trained on public articles. So, and what you realize is, hey, do you have comments? People commenting on this article, and then they're gonna answer with this. So, what usually we have a set list of questions. It's like you have to explore. You have to test it. So we have different levels of testing and it's like a black box, and we're trying to understand what are the weaknesses, because if we don't check, other people are going to check, other people are going to try to break it. So that's why usually we do this. And the interesting thing, and I remember we talked about this, David, is actually what most people do to protect is they have an AI and they put another AI in front of it to filter the bad, dangerous requests. So what we suggest usually is, okay, you have some kind of model, put some kind of filter in front of it. It's like another AI whose sole job is to make sure that the requests are not out of something that's not wanted.
Yeah, that's something people don't appreciate. At least sometimes when I talk to friends that are in the community, is that sometimes, or just in the privacy community, is that usually people think model, training set, pre-training data, and then output. But you can have multiple levels of models or AIs working to act as a guardrail, to be checking the output of another model to make sure it conforms to certain rules. And so it's not just one, sometimes it's a whole network of models working together to produce an output to end users. And that's a great point for our audience, is to think about the testing, using your techniques, the testing that's needed at each of those stages, but also at each level, for each responsibility or each persona that's being deployed within a platform using different models. So I guess, Morgan, in closing, is there any closing comments? I think this has been incredibly helpful for our community to understand this methodology a little bit better, to maybe adopt it themselves or to come to visit OWN and kind of talk to you guys more about it so that they can understand it. Are there any last thoughts or takeaway thoughts for the audience before we close this webinar?
I think all I want to say is that it's a very, it's something, it's a field, scraping that changes very fast. And we talked about AI, and it's changing even faster in the end. So there is a lot of things to do on a technical point of view and on the legal point of view. So just stay open-minded, and if you have questions, don't hesitate, contact us. Right.
So if somebody watching this wants to, or watching this in the future, hi people watching this in the future, want to continue the conversation with you, how can they find you, or what's a website URL or an email address
They
or
can just
X
go
or
on.
Twitter handle that they can
They
find
can
you?
go to own, like my own.security. Just go to the website, own.security. Go to the website, and there is a form. So don't worry. Just go to own.security, and we'll answer.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much. This has been a tremendous technical presentation and such a great white paper. We'll be sharing this, or I believe it's already available on the MUSA website. And again, for the Mitigating Unauthorized Scraping Alliance, would thank you all for joining us. I'm David Patariu, Venable attorney and privacy law specialist, and hopefully you'll join us once again for our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.